Hello and welcome to an Aussies Abroad special focusing on the world of American football as we delve deep into the NFL and college football scenes and Australia's ever-increasing presence in the USA's most popular sport. Now, Australia's NFL history actually began with Olympic high jumper Colin Ridgway, who played 3 games for the Dallas Cowboys as a punter back in 1965. Our next foray into the American football world was 2 decades later, when rugby union player Colin Scotts became the first Aussie to receive a college football scholarship when he signed with the University of Hawaii and went on to play 7 games with the Cardinals as a defensive tackle in 1987. But the idea of an Australian playing in the NFL first really captured the attention of the Australian sporting public when former AFL player Darren Bennett not only got the job as the San Diego Chargers punter in the mid-90s, he thrived in the NFL and ultimately became the league's punter of the 90s, an enormous honour. Now, Darren's success opened the door for other Aussies to follow, such as former AFL player Nathan Chapman, who played 3 preseason games for the Packers and spent some time with the Bears before ultimately building the most influential Aussie pipeline of the last decade, the Prokick Australia Punting Academy, which has taken college football by storm and is now filtering up into the NFL as well. In this Aussies Abroad special, we're going to chat all things American football with Darren and Nathan and learn about what it takes to get there and, even more importantly, what it takes to stay there and forge a successful career in the most cutthroat sporting industry in the world. At the top professional level, there's 32 punting jobs on the entire planet. And in a league where players can literally be fired at any moment, irrespective of what your contract might say, it's a vocation that many in the know say is at least 80% mental. It's a fascinating world, and we couldn't have 2 better experts to talk us through it. Our Aussies Abroad American football special starts now. Darren Bennett is considered by many as the godfather of Australian punting, the pioneer of the transition from Australian football to American football, the man who paved the way for others to follow. Now, Darren forged his own path, playing 78 VFL-AFL games for West Coast and Melbourne before he crossed the Pacific and worked his way up to the very top of the NFL's punting elite to be named the league's punter of the 90s and a San Diego Chargers Hall of Famer. Now, I had the absolute pleasure of spending time with Darren and his beautiful family numerous times over the years while we were both living in the US. Darren, a long-time Carlsbad resident who these days resides in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and his door is always open to any Aussie needing a taste of home. Jazz, welcome back to Aussies Abroad. Great to talk to you.
Mate, it's been a while, but it's great to see you. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Mate, let's get straight into the punting scene. Is it an art or a science? Are you an artist or a scientist?
I think it's a mix of both. I think it's why regular football players who punch each other in the face for a living don't really understand punters and kickers because they're not sure if it is an art or a science. But I think there's a combination of the two, you know, and luckily for me, coming from Australian rules where football is more of a science, and then going to be a punter in the US where it was more of an art, I sort of have a nice rounded understanding of both sides of it. So, you know, I think there's a lot of science involved in it. I think some people don't want to pay attention to that part of it, but I think it's a combo of the two.
A lot of people might look from the outside and think, well, it's just about having a strong leg. If you can roost the footy, then you can be a punter. But guys like yourself over the years have had lots of conversations and you compare it more to a golf swing. Why is that?
Yeah, look, and at the moment with our social media profiles, everyone comes out and there's always that one guy. You know, there's a kid Tyler Newsom right now, hit a 5.9 60-yard punt the other week. And everyone's like, oh my God, why is he not in the NFL? I'm going, because to swing as hard as it takes to kick a 5.9 second hang punt brings you more shanks than a coach is prepared to live with. So that's why the kid's not in the NFL. He just got himself on another practice squad because he's super impressive in practice. But if you put him under the pressure of a game or in weather challenges, he can't repeat it every time. And so that's the hard part. Everyone who plays golf as badly as I do has the most beautiful practice swing ever. And you go, oh yeah, that's great. Now let's hit a golf ball, and I shank my drive all over the place. And that's really the difference between the two, is being able to do that when the crowds are there and when the noise is there and the distractions are there, being able to shut it out. I think it is. It's a lot like a golf swing.
Everyone's chasing perfection. What's considered in college football and NFL ranks as being an acceptable success rate? How many of your punts need to go exactly where you want them to?
I would say 7 out of 10 in college and 9 out of 10, or, if you hit 95 punts, if you shank more than 5 punts in a season, you're pretty much done. So, it's a under 5% success failure rate.
So it's better to be consistently good than occasionally great.
Correct. And when we teach guys, we always go, that's a fantastic punt, that's awesome, but you need to be able to do that 8 out of 10 times. And so what we try to do is we dial their effort, their extension, their power back to 80% and go, just live with an 80% punt. 80% of your perfect punt, but that eliminates the 20% punts that they're the ones your coach remembers.
We always thought that the trickle of Aussie punters would become a flood, and it has over time, particularly at the college level, but it's now filtering through to NFL level, which is fantastic as well. Where do you see the punting landscape at the moment?
Yeah, look, it's, 2020, who knows? It's, there was no real off season. I thought it was my son Thomas was a graduate at TU this year. He had a couple of NFL teams look at him, but he was a marginal kid. So a lot of those ones they get a benefit of going into a rookie camp for 3 or 4 days in April, and the coaches go, oh yeah, this kid will develop, and we like what we see, and so we'll put him on practice squad or whatever. There was very few guys that got that opportunity this year, and so it's going to back up in the next 2 years. There's going to be a graduating senior class that'll come in next year with the graduating senior class that sort of didn't get a real chance this year. Obviously Aaron and some of those guys were the exception rather to the rule, because normally in an off season, I would have at one of the teams, they'd have 5 punters in before you got to training camp and pick your veteran and your rookie to go into camp. Whereas this year they didn't even look at anyone, And so the punting landscape, I think, is a more athletic landscape. I think the guys are better athletes now. And like I said before, there's younger coaches at special teams now that are like, show me what you can do and see how it can help us.
And just explain the entire landscape to us, Darren, because it's very, very different to Australian sport. So you go over, you get a college scholarship, you graduate. If you have ambitions of continuing to play football somewhere, really the only place to play is the NFL. So if you don't end up on a practice squad, you're on your own. You're going to have that self-sufficiency of going to a park with some friends, working with a coach or a mentor, and just doing it yourself, sending off tapes and trying to get out on the workout circuit. Explain to us how that whole process works, because it's a pretty tough, challenging side of the sport.
Yes, and in a regular year, they come and live with me.
That's right. Everyone lives on your couch.
Yeah. So especially the guys trying to translate across into the spiral leg swing. I've had quite a few of them over the last few years. And so like Lockie Edwards, for an example, I had a hand in Lock going to Buffalo. I'd been talking to Heath Farwell, who I played with in Minnesota, who's the special teams coach. He went up there to go and try and win that job, but he literally had 2 punt sessions and he was a bit rusty. And so normally you would go in April and you would do OTAs for 6 weeks with them, and then you would go to minicamp, and you would be allowed to sort of ease into your consistency, and they would find out who you were. He was there 5 days and they cut him. And so it was a difficult situation. This is not a normal year. 2020 is not a normal season. Whereas normally Locke would win that job. He'd go and punt for the Bills, and he may punt for them for 10 years. But because they had such an urgency to pick their punter, he didn't really get a shot. Now, Locke will get another shot somewhere. He's pretty good, and he's still in NFL shape. Very quickly you lose NFL shape if you're not there. But Locke said afterwards in an interview, he literally been working out with Home Depot buckets of concrete in his garage because he couldn't go to the gym. He couldn't come and see me. I couldn't help tune up his drop and all that sort of stuff, which he normally would do 2 or 3 times in an off season.
The culture of college football, I think, is probably a little bit more similar to an Australian culture, isn't it? In terms of, it is a club, it is a team, it is that sense that we're all in this together for 3 or 4 years at the very minimum. But at NFL level, it's extremely different. There's a cultural shock, isn't there, for Aussies when they step up into the NFL, which is much more of a cutthroat business and a franchise without the socialisation, without we all live together and we all spend the off seasons together and we all hang out together and we're all best buddies. Not like that at NFL level, is it?
No, it's really not. It makes me laugh sometimes. The Australian media is like, he signed a 4-year deal. I go, nope, he signed a 1-week deal. You know, that people are like, he signed 4 years. And I'm like, no. And that happens time and again. Guys will sign a 5-year deal, play 3 years. They'll sign a 4-year deal, only play 2 years. And that's where people don't understand that, you know, when you sign a 4-year deal, as a veteran, you can guarantee a little bit of it if you make the first day roster. But if you don't, then it's week to week. It's week to week. And it's good money week to week, but it's really literally week to week. And it can be week to week for 10 years.
Tell us about the cultural differences in an NFL locker room to an AFL or any other Australian NRL locker room.
Well, it's exactly what you said, Jace, that, you know, you have that growing developmental thing in an AFL thing where you play juniors against these guys. Australia is so small when it comes to that. Even if you come from Western Australia, you probably played Teal Cup if you're good enough, and you played against guys. I played against Paul Salmon and Damien Burke and all those guys in the Teal Cup, even though I was in Western Australia. And I played with a lot of really good West Australian players. Whereas here, you get thrown into a college football team. You don't know half of those guys. You don't know where they're from. And so when you get in the NFL, it's the same situation. People come from all over the country. You've never met them before. You've probably heard about them and you've seen them play college football, but it's an instant chemistry that you have to try and create. It's not a built thing over 3 or 4 years to be able to go, okay, this guy's getting better. I mean, there's some guys that will be there year to year, but of a 53-man roster, you could lose 27 of them, 25 of them over a year. So half your roster disappears every off-season, and you've got to try and blood these guys, bring them in, and bring them onto your chemistry and your culture straight away. And some teams can do it and some can't.
We hear journeys like Ben Graham's, which was phenomenal. You know, he was such a successful punter when he came over with the Jets. They were the captain of the special teams. He actually has finally established himself, has a couple of bad games. He suddenly gets cut. I think he got cut something like 3 times from three different occasions in the space of about 8 weeks. But then a month after that, he was playing in the Super Bowl. It just highlights how crazy this business is, doesn't it?
Oh, it really is. And it was funny because he came and stayed with us, and we were over at La Costa Canyon punting on the fields, and Rosemary turns up in the van and she goes, "Where's your phone?" And I said, "It's in the car." "Why?" And she said, "Well, the Jets are calling because they want to bring Ben in because the punter that was there strained his hamstring running down on scout team, and they were coming to play the Chargers on Monday Night Football." And so Ben went and grabbed his phone, called the Jets, and they said, "Where do we fly you in from?" And he goes, "I'm in San Diego. I'll just drive down to the stadium." And so, you know, Ben's journey, you know, he was on a terrific journey with Katie and the kids, and they're a tremendous family. Sav and Rose Rocker are tremendous people, great families. And so to have them us be part of their journey as well was great to watch, you know. And Ben had both those guys had such great AFL careers, and then to go on and extend and play in the NFL I think is pretty cool.
Darren Bennett, fantastic punter, even better human being. You talk to any of the guys he's helped along the way, people like Ben Graham, Sav Rocker, Matt McBriar, and they'll all rave about the amazing influence Darren's had on them and their lives. Now, speaking of positive influences, Prokick Australia Punting Academy founders Nathan Chapman and John Smith have helped hundreds of young Aussies secure a life-changing opportunity to head to the US on a fully paid college scholarship that furthers their education and provides them with experiences they'll cherish forever. Nathan grew up in one of the most Aussie-sounding places imaginable, Kangaroo Flat in Bendigo, Victoria. A talented Australian rules footballer, he played 76 AFL games for Brisbane and Hawthorn from 93 to 2000. And some 4 years later, he bobbed up again, but this time in American football when he signed with the Green Bay Packers. Now, he never quite made it onto an NFL field for a regular season game, but he learnt so much from his own NFL experiences that he came back to Australia with the idea of helping others realise their dream. He joined forces with former place kicker John Smith to set up Prokick Australia, which has forged a stellar reputation in training and developing young Aussies for college and pro careers. Nathan Chapman, welcome back to Aussies Abroad. I reckon we first met your first year of Prokick, which was what, 2009, thereabouts, up in Monbulk with that first ever class that we're going through. And even back then, we always thought it was the trickle was one day going to become a flood. And sure enough, 10 or 11 years later, there's more than 100 Aussies overseas plying their craft in the world of punting.
Yeah, absolutely. The lucky buggers have kept sort of piling through, which has been great. And, breaking down the doors from day one, from, getting guys into our program, but also having the coaches aware that they're talented guys. It's been great. So, I think, granted, if everyone had been playing football this year, there would have been about 80 starters. But, so far there's, I think we've done 148 scholarships. So it's, certainly become more prevalent, which is awesome.
And this one's probably a difficult question, Chappie. That when you think of all the great punters that have come out of Australia, we've had Darren Bennett, Matt McBriar, Big Sab Rocker, Benny Graham. You got all this list of Aussie punters, right? Now, without notice, you know what's coming. I want you to, based on temperament, technique, big game performance, who are you going with as the best of all time? Who's the GOAT?
I think the phone's ringing. Someone's at the door. I've got to go. Good question. You're asking me who's got all of that. I'll tell you who I really liked. I actually really liked Sab Rocker. I would probably say, I reckon I'd almost say Sab. It just happens to be, 6'10" and 250 kilos and has a massive leg to feel comfortable kicking the ball, right? But I thought his style was really good. I thought it was a beautiful, smooth, effortless kick.
Chappie, punting's evolving and the landscape's evolving and the nature of the role's evolving. It was always traditionally a defensive role. When you're backed up against the wall, just get it and bomb it and get it out of there. It's a lot more strategic now. It's even really become, in some ways, an offensive position where you can really flip the field and make a massive difference. What impacts Australia had on changing the landscape of punting in the NFL and college, for that matter? Yeah,
certainly it's changed college. Like, it's amazing, the transformation about what's being done, and even having people to kick on the right and left foot, kick it high, kick it low. Again, it was forever was kick it high and kick it to the returner. It was not kick it away from them. And I've had this argument and still will have the argument. I still don't know why they don't utilise the sideline more, like Jeff Fiegels.
Mm-hmm.
Kick it out of bounds. If you don't want the return to happen, let's not kick it to Devin Hester. Yeah.
So what's the answer, Chappie? You and I have talked about this a number of times over the years. I'm yet to hear a good answer.
I would go back and say, I remember Urban Meyer. I remember Cameron Johnson playing in the game. I believe they were playing Northwestern. It was freezing cold. It was a tight game. And I remember Cameron coming to me and we were just talking about the game afterwards. It was late. They were sort of up. He was kicking from probably his own 40, and it was Urban Meyer said, this has to be fair court. This guy cannot return it. He's really good, and we cannot have a return for them to score. And now Cameron's probably 2 years in. And he turns to Urban Meyer and says, well, how about I just kick it out of bounds? And Urban Meyer, he said, he remembers Urban Meyer going, what? You can do that? And it's like, if you sort of think that the 100 years prior of playing the game, coaches didn't know someone's got that type of control. And Fiegels was great at it because he just kept putting it way in the corner and no one could return it. Why don't we use the sideline? And that tells me that the coaches weren't ready for that confidence in someone to use a kick. And remember, they're always thinking spiral, right? Well, why don't I just do a drop punt and kick it out of bounds at 42 yards? And he was blown away by it. And so he's one of the prestigious college football coaches ever, who was sort of gobsmacked as to why he would even be presented with that idea and didn't know about it. Even though Cameron would practice that stuff at training, he just didn't comprehend or digest that it could be done in a game. So I'm saying that's where the NFL's at. But I would say, well, why kick it high and have any return at all? And being told, well, if you just have a bad day, you can be out. I think that sort of really steels your mind to putting in the extra work, understanding that, hey, this is now livelihood and I can't take any shortcuts. And so I think, America's got that for whatever reason, their contracts are like that. But that's sort of because there's so many people and someone's always prepared to step back up and be talented enough to play at that level. But I think each individual battles their own demons in that world, and it's to what resources they give themselves to be able to cope. But yeah, it plays a massive part.
What are the biggest challenges that Aussies have to face when they go over and immerse themselves in this college or NFL world?
Just lifestyle and culture change. It's again, we cop some heat there for taking the American jobs, that type of thing. You're taking our scholarships from our young American kids, and it's like, well, hang on, if you're prepared to join a program on the other side of the world, and without it's the unknown. I hope I get a scholarship, and you're prepared to leave your family and friends and move over there, and you've never met anyone, and you're going into a high performance area where you'll be judged, on social media and within how you feel and your family or friends, whether you're enjoying it. Like, the hardest things to learning how to enjoy that ride and the journey. It's probably, and once you get, I guess, and that's probably one of the biggest things we've done at Prokick is trying to say, hey, listen, you're there and you're doing this journey with the other guys that you're training with. Like, make this your family when you go over. So you've got someone to talk to, and you've got someone to go and stay with on summer break, and you've got someone in the next state who's going through the same thing, and you've got someone who you can, ring and discuss about what you're going through. And so for those guys to sort of sacrifice that, I commend them, because most people only see it on Sunday morning, watching it on TV on their lounge room with a cup of cocoa, and go, oh, gee, I'd love to do that, and I could do that. But they haven't realised the sacrifice and the training, leaving the family and friends, meeting new people into the absolute unknown, and still being able to generate their own, excitement and energy to go, hey, I'm here now. Every day's a new day, but I've got to enjoy it. I've got to study, and I've got to do all these things. So I would say just that moving part is probably that initial part. Then once they learn to roll with it, and if they've trained well and they perform well then they've got a smile on their face, and then they've just become a quite worldly person, which will hold them in great stead for the future. Travelled, and just to look outside the bubble that is here in Australia.
What about from a non-punting perspective? We've got Jordan Mailata, Adam Gotsis. We've seen some positional players have a go at college and NFL level. What do you think on the non-punting side of things? How much more difficult, or is it just as difficult to try and become a position player in college or NFL for an Australian kid?
We've absolutely got the talent here to play positional spots. Absolutely. I question the quarterback stuff at the moment. We've got the talent, but we probably don't have the pathway to break down the US coaches saying that there's like 14,000 high schools in Texas who all play football, and they all pretty good quarterbacks come out of Texas. It's that there's a lot of challenges of what you're up against. Size and speed we do have, and there's players that can play. Our strength and conditioning to play Aussie rules serves us only so well from a speed point of view. We've got to have speed and endurance as opposed to just explosive speed. Getting the trust. We go all right because we've got a niche we can kick, and nowhere else in the world, we'll sort of say it like that, nowhere else in the world plays the game that kicks like we do, that translate it into punting. College needs to have good young footballers from here on their team who are hard nuts, who can catch a football, but they just need to learn the routes, and they've got to have good speed, absolutely. But I think there's a spot where you don't have to have elite speed. Yeah, you want to be as fast as you can, but I reckon that our potential toughness and catching a ball skills, or a size, and from a tight end, I think we can learn that. We're just not getting the opportunity because there's so many kids in America. Why would they take a young kid out of Australia and give them a scholarship? But it's that balance of kids getting an opportunity, but they don't get the opportunity because they don't have $50,000 to spend at college just to be on the team. And then they've got to fight their way through proving it to the coaches. And then they've got to be on a team that just doesn't have a starter who's got 2 or 3 years to go. And there's the opportunity. And so firmly believe that the talent's here and that it can be tapped into. Just don't know what the answer is because there's that little breakdown in position in the moment. That, to be honest, I think it's actually the US coaches need to come across here, see the talent and go, hang on, we've got something here.
Well, that's it for our Aussies Abroad NFL special. We also have full-length interviews with both Darren Bennett and Nathan Chapman for you to enjoy, where they dive deeper into their own personal journeys, and they're 2 amazing backstories well worth exploring further. The easiest way to keep up to date with all our latest news and interviews featuring Aussies doing interesting things around the world is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by logging on to aussiesabroad.tv. That's got all the links to all our social media. You can also listen to Aussies Abroad as a podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favourite pod. Thanks so much for your company. We'll catch you next time on Aussies Abroad.